But we did want to start with those new Biden poll numbers.
Yeah, some really interesting developments, which are very important in terms of conceiving of the Biden presidency. For pretty much the, last 2 years of American politics, it's been ruled by COVID. How are you handling COVID? The economy being a second. Well, we are now seeing basically a tie between the two. So let's put this up there on the screen from CNBC. And there's a lot to dig in here. As Josh Kraushaar points out, inflation now ties with coronavirus as the biggest concern for Americans, up 16 points from the prior survey. Now, overall, Biden actually saw his numbers drop to 41% of public approval and critically crossed the majority 52% disapproval number. The other important thing there is that you can see that economy and COVID are beginning to become intertwined. The president now at just 50% with his COVID-19 approval. And I think in general, what you're seeing is that things are just beginning to feel stagnant across the entire country. Chris Arnaud, somebody I really respect, he's resumed his kind of tour of the country. And
oh, really?
Yeah, so he's going across, talking to people. And what he pointed out, and we've seen this consistently in the data, is he's like, look, Biden at the end of the day he was elected to bring stuff back to normal, and it's not normal. And there's a variety of reasons for that. Supply chain crisis, inflation, a price increase, COVID, the Delta variant. But in general, people say, hey man, you said you were gonna do something and you just haven't done enough. And when the president, comes out maybe like once a week and is just not presenting any sort of real leadership, I think that in general, he's going to be getting the blame for something which is already baked in without any of the credit of seeming to actually do something. You kind of see this over and over again. And it was really evident, Crystal, in that town hall with Anderson Cooper, a lot of bizarre moments, some of which we'll cover. But the important one was he didn't really seem to have a clue about what was actually going on as to now what the number one issue concerning Americans is, which is rising prices because of the supply chain. Let's take a listen.
I was able to go to the private portion with 40% of all products coming into the United States of America on the West Coast go through Los Angeles and what am I doing here?
Is it Long Beach?
Long Beach, thank you. And I know both the mayors.
You probably know that.
Not an inspiring
Port
moment.
of Los Angeles and Long Beach, California. Right now, Crystal, we are seeing more action on Twitter activism in terms of changing the supply chain crisis than the United States government. There was a Flexport CEO, somebody who I also look to for analysis, who rented a boat and tweeted about some of the backlogs. And he ended up getting the mayor of Long Beach in order to rescind like a container stacking thing, which was causing some backlog. So that is kind of stunning to me. And I know you're doing your monologue on the port workers as well, but
right.
the federal government is not doing all of what it can and should be doing. And Americans are taking notice and saying, hey man, you need to be doing something here. And it's difficult to describe how well it is not going for him in terms of where he started at the beginning of his presidency.
Yes, I think all of that is true. And, it's kind of the backfiring of the basement strategy.
Yeah, this is the big back.
So when he was up against Trump, the best thing he could do was kind of sit back and let Trump hang himself. Mm-hmm. And that's exactly what happened, even though, Trump did everything he could to lose and still barely lost.
Right.
Biden barely won the presidency by the skin of his, what did they say? Skin of your
teeth.
Skin of your teeth. That doesn't even make any sense.
Doesn't
anyway,
make any sense.
So he wins the presidency by the skin of his teeth from this basement strategy, and he's sort of continued that strategy as president, and that is not really what people want right now when you have so much uncertainty. We're trying to recover from coronavirus. The pandemic is still ongoing. People are feeling unsafe. People are feeling there's, these tensions around pandemic responses. All of that's going on. You have a lot of economic chaos. You have some things that are looking pretty good. Workers getting raises for the first time in a long time, a tight labor market. We've covered, of course, the Great Resignation and the labor strikes that are ongoing across the country and workers moving to form unions. Some of that is good. But then on the other hand, you have this supply chain collapse. You have prices rising. So even workers who are getting raises, they're not feeling it because inflation is going up.
Yep.
And one of the things that they pointed to in this poll, which I thought was really interesting, you now have a plurality of the public that believes there will be a recession in the next year.
Wow.
A plurality of the public. So 47% of the public thinks we are headed into a recession, rather than when Biden came into office, people felt like, okay, things are going to get better. They're going to get back on track. We're going to come back to whatever normal even means. I think that's part of the issue is, in some ways, promising a return to normal was like a nothing promise. And in some ways, it was a gigantic, like, unfulfillable promise, because what does that even mean to people to feel like they're back to normal pre-pandemic? I mean, that may not even really be possible given some of the dramatic changes that happen in this country and around the world as a result of the pandemic. But bottom line is, people are looking for leadership from Biden. They're not really getting it.
No.
Even the things that they are doing, like the, little moves they're trying to make at the ports to make things move more efficiently, he is either unable or unwilling to really get out and sell these measures that are being taken. And then also in this poll, the one bright spot was that the reconciliation package, the Build Back Better plan, it actually polls really well. They're just not getting it done.
Yes.
and I don't know how much juice they'll get from it anyway, because at this point, they've cut it back so much that people are unlikely to really feel it and really have, a positive experience of it. So it just feels like another DC morass that isn't going to really move the ball forward in a significant way.
Yeah, I think it's long been in morass territory, and especially, look, some of the stuff in there, these new billionaire taxes, I think are good, and we can cover that and talk about it extensively. But I think the important point is that this is not just some one-off. Poll after poll after poll.
Yeah.
It's about the law of averages. Let's put the next one up there. This is from Gallup. Once again, pretty respected pollster. And what do you see there? Which is that even in polls, which again, you should remember that these dramatically overstated Biden's performance whenever it came to the 2020 presidential election, are now finding him significantly underwater with independent voters. And this has been the most critical drop for the president. So in the Gallup poll alone, Biden is down from 61% in February to 34% at the 9-month mark of his presidency, with an overall approval rating of 42%. That is, an unequivocal disaster. And September really was a big turning point. And I think I've been getting to try and figure out why, which is that September was both the height of kind of Delta panic. That was where, people, whether you agree or not, vaccine mandate or no, people were freaked out enough in order to get mobilized on both sides because of Delta. Afghanistan, obviously, the media coverage as well. That's when the reconciliation bill all got completely shot. It became very obvious by mid-September. You're like, oh, this thing's just not going to happen.
This is not going well.
So you have all three of these things culminating. Oh, also, that is when we saw the single largest increase of people quitting, but also the single largest increase in price. So it's like, and gas prices apparently out in California are like $5 a gallon now, which is horrible, for a lot of people who are working class.
Wow.
I think if you put all that together, you are making it so that it was the month alone which would sink him. And when you think about it too, it's not one thing you can just fix. There are a multitude of problems that have all had a confluence that have contributed to where they are right now. And, the most important one, we mentioned it last time, but this is very important, was the Grinnell-Seltzer poll. Let's put that up there. Came out last week. Again, and it showed a massive loss of support amongst independents with concerns over economy, immigration, and coronavirus. The poll showed just 37% of respondents approving of Biden's job. Are you beginning to see a pattern here in the 35 to 40% range, none of which you would really want to be when you're president of the United States? A bigger problem is that you can see that in 2020 exit polling, so again, on the day that Biden won the presidency, he won independent voters by a 54 to 41% margin. If the election were held today, our poll would show former President Trump winning that group 45% to 28. So let that sink in. 54% on election day to 28% today. So a near halving of the independent support, which is obviously the group that pushed him over the edge. Either people who came out to vote or people who switched, mostly married white men, from Trump to Biden. That is, once again, a disaster for the current president and, not good for the midterm elections in particular.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is important because it's easy, obviously, to criticize and to compare to like a theoretical, non-existent politician who would do a good job.
Right, but this is like.
But here they're actually comparing to the dude that just left that we know did a terrible job. And people are like, on second thought, I might go with that dude. That's really, really bad. It's a really bad sign. And as you point out, all of these polls, even the best among them, overstated Biden's support going into the election. So however bad it looks for Biden in these polls, it's likely a little bit worse than what the pollsters are able to gather, just because they've been really unable to capture accurately the breadth of Republican sentiment and favorability in the country over the past number of years. There was one last piece here that I thought was kind of interesting that shows it's not just, obviously Republicans are opposed to Biden, they're kind of locked in. Independents, dramatic shift away from Biden. But you also see some real apathy among the Democratic base.
Yes.
And I thought that this quote that Sam Stein captured from a voter was pretty telling. Now, this is about the idea that within the reconciliation bill, which we're about to tell you a little bit more about, that they're thinking of cutting the child tax credit, means testing it, only expanding it for a year. And what this guy, Jake Wright, who's 40 years old, said, he says, I've been a Democrat my entire adult life. But letting a program expire or means testing it so that people who would generally benefit from it will lose out on much needed help infuriates me. It makes me wonder why I bother supporting these people. Yeah. So again, as we think about moving into the midterms, as we think about what the future of power is going to look like here in Washington, D.C., one of the things that we told you consistently is it really, really matters who's energized. Not just, what's the overall approval rating and how do people feel about the country. Those numbers are already bad for Biden. But who's actually energized? And when you have a sentiment like this, where voters who are lifelong Democrats are like, why do I bother with these people? Like, you've literally been promising me the prescription drug reform thing since 2006. You've had complete control of Washington several times during that period, and you still haven't gotten it done. Like, what are we doing here? Why am I bothering? That also is going to be a massive drag on them. Some analysts are saying, I'm not sure I buy this analysis, but it's kind of interesting that the Virginia race that's coming up, the gubernatorial election that we're going to talk to Kyle Kondik about today, turns on Democrats being able to get something done in Washington to kind of fire up their side and get them to ultimately turn out. I'm not sure that I really believe that. I think it's much more about who's able to scare their base more. Does Terry McAuliffe's pitch that Glenn Youngkin is basically electing Trump
with the mask on?
Right. Or is Youngkin's pitch that Terry McAuliffe is some race warrior who's going to force your kids to be segregated or whatever he's saying? Is that the thing that ultimately wins the day? I think it ultimately turns more on that. But overall, Democrats cannot continue to promise a bunch of things that they have no intention on ever delivering and then be surprised when people don't show up for them.
So that's the key point. You've got huge apathy amongst the Democratic base, no real reason to try and come out. I mean, look, it's 2010 all over again. It's the exact same thing. Obama comes in, there's a big economic crisis, they pass some middling stimulus package, that's the only thing. Then they do this horrific monster of whatever Obamacare actually turned out to be. Nobody really knew what it was. All the Republicans have to do is promise I'm not Obama. Massive swing in support. Dems were like, this doesn't seem that great. My wages continue to go down. I still lost my job. The economy is still in mild recession. I did get a new job, but it pays me half of what it used to. Oh, and all the factories are shipping overseas. And what happens? The 2010 red wave. I mean, we're basically in this exact same scenario. And it just seems very difficult now for Biden to try and drag himself out of the hole. That being said, maybe Trump is stupid enough in order to maybe Trump is still so powerful of a motivator to Democrats that it'll be enough. It's very possible, that you can avoid some massive void. The real test is going to be the the test here in Virginia, because we are going to see Terry McAuliffe has said nothing else but Glenn Youngkin is Trump. If he wins, that's a very powerful validator for the Trump strategy for Democrats. It could be enough in many of these independent places. Personally, I'm banking that it's not necessarily in Virginia, but overall on the national level. But who knows how many points it does count for whenever Trump is off the ballot, but still a boogeyman to a lot of Democrats.
Joe Biden won Virginia by 10 points.
Yeah. This shouldn't
It's a
even be
blue
question.
state.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
Democrats control everything. They have both Senate seats, governor's mansion, House of Delegates, state Senate. It should not be coming down to the wire at all. And yet, here we are.
Yeah.
And I think even if Terry McAuliffe is ultimately able to hang on and edge out Glenn Youngkin, it's a very bad sign, ultimately, for where Democrats stand across the country. Hey, guys, thanks so much for watching.
That's right. Just as a reminder, you can become a premium subscriber today. Watch the full show completely uncut, our reactions to each other's monologues. You get to listen to it. You get to ask us questions, all that good stuff. Link is right there in the description or at breakingpoints.com.
Best of all, great way to say screw you to the mainstream media.